All right, everybody, good evening. I'm sorry I'm late. That's my trademark. So I prepared handouts for everybody. I'm just going to pass this around. This is only going to make sense in context with everything that I'm going to be talking about. So if you want to pass these around and everybody take a copy. And as soon as everybody has one, I'm going to get started. So my plan is to basically go for about 45 minutes. And then we'll take a quick 15-minute break, you know, if you guys need to get water, use the bathroom, whatever. And then probably another 15, 20 minutes, we'll round it out. So as soon as everybody has one, do you need some in the back here? Thank you. So I want to teach the phonetic way of how to teach a child to read. Now, phonetic means that you're going by sound. The phone and phonetic is you're going by sound. And the reason why there is such a thing as a phonetic approach, like the alternative to that would be like if you think about Chinese script, where instead of breaking the words down into sounds and each sound being represented by a different letter, they have a picture. And those are called pictograms. They have a picture for fire, and you draw, you know, the word that means fire, or the word that means house, or the word that means mother, or woman. And sometimes they're related, like woman is like a simpler form of mother, like mother is like woman with something added on. But the downside to a method like that is that the only words you know are words that you have memorized. And as opposed to languages that are phonetic-based, they have an alphabet. Our alphabet has 26 letters, and those 26 letters make certain sounds. And by breaking each word that you say down into its sounds, you can represent each sound by a letter, and you can break it down into letters. And that's what the phonetic method is. Now, the first thing I wanted to start with, and you will find this on the first page of your handout, is why it is so important to learn to read. And this method that I'm going to explain tonight works for adults. And there are many adults who struggle with reading, and the best thing that they can do is to do this with their own child. If you as an adult struggle with reading, if you simply, do you want to pass this back to her, please? If you simply, all the way back to Bonita, if you simply go through this with your child and learn this with your child, you will become a much better reader. If you have an older child who struggles with reading, maybe they went to public school, maybe your spouse struggles with it. Whoever struggles with this will benefit them. This works equally well for everybody. So the reason why reading is so important is because, number one, God gave us a book, of course. The Bible is a book. It's not a comic strip. It's not a DVD. It's a book. So it's really important that you read, and not just that you read the Bible, but that you read every word of the Bible. And not just kind of get the meaning, but, you know, every jot and every tittle is important. But the other reason why reading is important is because once your child knows how to read, it opens up all learning to them. They can sit and read a science book. They can read a craft book. They can read the newspaper. They can read anything, and they can gain more knowledge. So it's really the foundation for all learning. And the other thing about reading is that reading is such a complex process in your brain that it trains your brain just to be smarter in all areas. And how well you read will determine your success, not just academically, but it will determine your success, pretty much your lifelong business success. Even people who intend to put their kids in public school would do really well to at least teach their kids to read at home. Because if kids go into the school system already knowing how to read, they will excel and they will be ahead academically for their entire school careers. Not that that's the most important part, but that is a big part. And when you're good in school, you're confident and you think you can tackle anything. Whereas if you're a poor reader, you will struggle in all subjects and you will think, I'm just a bad student, I'm not smart. And it really just comes down to not having learned to read right. So, and of course, we all like to read just for enjoyment, even as adults, because reading takes you places that you might not really go in real life. You can read about them. So reading is really the foundation for all learning, and it's very, very important. Now, people often ask me at what age they should start homeschooling their children. And I always say when they're young enough or old enough to learn to read. So then that begs the question, well, when are they old enough to learn to read? And it's 100% based on the child. The approach that I'm going to talk about can start as early as 2, that's the youngest I've seen it, and as late as 7. but the average child will be about 4 years old when they start. And they typically need 3 years to complete it, although it could be done in as little as a year and a half. So if you have a savant 2-year-old, he could be done by 3.5, and I've had one of those. If you have somebody who really struggles and has strengths in other areas, they might not start till 7, and they might not be a good reader until they're 10, and I've had one of those. But most of my other kids have fallen into, they start learning when they're about 4, and they can read independently when they're about 7. And when I say read independently, it means they can pick up any book and read any book, not just, you know, books that are on their reading level, because the English language is so complex that it takes approximately 3 years to learn to read. By comparison, German and Hungarian both took me less than a year to learn to read because they're much more phonetic. Which brings me to the next subject, those who promote a see and say method. So see and say is the opposite of phonetic. See and say is where you see the word house and you read it as home. And it's considered correct because you got the right meaning. Because really you didn't learn to read the word house, you just learned to associate these specific letter dashes as something to do with a home or a house or something of the sort. So those who say, well, we should go to a see and say method where we just memorize what certain letter arrangements mean, what they will say is that English is not a phonetic language. And they're partly right. As languages go, English is not very phonetic. Hungarian is my first language. Hungarian has the same 26 letters. We have some diphthongs and blends. Altogether, we have 42 sounds. If you memorize those 42 sounds, you can read Hungarian 100% accurately. And in even words that they take from foreign languages, they completely change them to where they're exactly written as they are pronounced. And you could read Hungarian perfectly without speaking one word of Hungarian. If you just memorize, A always says A, you know, long A always says A, and you could read perfectly without ever understanding. English is not like that. English is approximately, I put the exact statistics in there, I think it's about 60% exactly phonetic, and the rest is all exceptions. But those exceptions are very consistent. So if you learn the exceptions and you see the pattern, then it's like over 95% phonetic. So that's really a phonetic language once you learn the exceptions. So we're still on that first page. If you look at the, one thing I forgot to mention about, you know, it takes about 3 years. It's really important. Teaching a child to read is very frustrating. And if you've never done it, you might think, why would that be frustrating? It's painful. Because you're going to listen to them sound out just the most simple, boring consonant and vowel blends. La, ba, ta, up and down. And you're going to fall, I mean, I've fallen asleep. It's very painful. So it's best to have the kid either like you're already sitting on the sofa nursing the baby, or maybe they can sit at the kitchen counter while you're cooking. Do something to occupy your mind because it's really painful. And if you find yourself getting frustrated or the child gets frustrated, you don't want them crying. Just put it away. And personally, I find that 20 minutes is the max that I ever can work with a child and it still be beneficial and they're not shut down and I'm not shutting down. So 20 minutes at a time, no more than twice a day at the most, but really once a day is plenty. And if you get frustrated before then, just put it away. So now I'm going to actual step-by-step. If you want to turn that over, we're going to start on the first page, into the actual step-by-step of how to teach a child to read. Now, I don't know how good everybody's foundation is as to these terms. I'm going to start out with just simple explanations and then go from there. The English language has 26 letters. But those 26 letters make a lot more than 26 sounds. But out of those 26 letters, we have the vowels and we have the consonants. And the vowels, we have 5 vowels. A, E, I, O, and U. All the other letters are consonants. Now, when you look at the word consonant, con means with, and sonata, it means the sound. A consonant, the reason why they call consonants is because they're sounds that go with another sound. Like for example, when I say the letter L, I say L. I really put an E in front of it, which would be the E. Whereas these kind of sound on their own. E, O, ah. So these make their own sounds. They kind of stand alone. Not so much in the English language because A is really two sounds. But the consonants are typically L, or B is really B, E together. So that's why they're called consonants. There's an exception to this, the Y. The Y can go either way, but we're not going to talk about that yet. So when you teach a child to read, you don't necessarily need to start with teaching them the alphabet. There's some merit to that, but that doesn't have to be the first step. That can be really overwhelming to a child to see 26 letters. The first thing you want to teach a child is the vowel sounds. And when you teach them the vowel sounds, you want to teach them the short vowel sounds. So the most common sounds that these letters will make is either their short sound or their long sound. And you start with teaching them the short sounds. And to mark that it's a short sound, you put a smiley face over it. This is universally recognized in readers and everything as meaning the short sound. So the short sound of A says A as an apple, and I put the list in there. E says E as an elephant. I says I as an Indian. O says O as an ostrich, and U says as an umbrella. So that's the first thing you want to teach the child, is what these say. Now, do teach them A says A as an apple. A says A. And you practice that with them. You show them an uppercase A. You show them a lowercase a, and you says A says A as an apple. A says A. E says E as an elephant. E says E. And you practice that with them. And there's flashcards that you can use for that are very beneficial. You want to be careful when you buy flashcards because many times flashcards are not made to teach phonetic reading. And you find a flashcard that has an apple on it, but then you'll find one that has an, like say an alligator on it, that still works, but then sometimes has something off the wall like an acorn. And now it's like, does it say A? Does it say A? So you want to use flashcards that have one long on it, one short on it, and one long on it for each of the vowels. And nothing confusing like, where maybe the O makes more like an sound or things like that. So you want to get flashcards that are actually made for phonetic reading. And you practice that with them. And other ways that you can practice the vowel sounds is that you just talk to your child and you say, which of these words do you hear A in? Do you hear A in bat or in bit? And the child hopefully is saying bat. And when you've practiced that a little, then you can say, what vowel sound do you hear in the word van? And hopefully the child would say A as an apple. And you just practice that with them until they're really good on these. And once they have their short vowel sounds down, that's when you're actually going to begin teaching them to read. The consonants you can introduce one at a time. Typically, a lot of kids that have already learned the alphabet will know more than just one consonant sound. But I found the easiest is to introduce one consonant sound at a time. So an easy one to start with is T. It's a recognizable one. Kids like it. It looks nice. Let me make that a little bit bigger. So you teach them, T says T as in table. T says T, T, T. And you just teach them that. You're going to see where I go with this in just a minute. And once they know that this is T, you now combine it with the vowels that they already learned. So now you teach the child, okay, this is called a blend ladder because you're blending T, A, T, E, T, I, T, A, T, A. Now I didn't blend those. If I were to blend them, I would say ta, te, ti, ta, ta. And the difference between saying T, A, and ta is the hardest step in learning to read I've found. Once the child grasps of how to blend these two letters together smoothly and not just look at them as individual units and saying t-a, or worse yet, ta-a, but ta, that's a really hard step. So if this takes you weeks, don't get discouraged. Now, I mentioned here that hopefully the child doesn't say ta. When you teach the consonant sounds, be really careful that you really only say the sound of the consonant. B says B, not ba. Don't say B says ba, as in bottle, or ba in bib, because there's no ba in bib. It's just B. B says B. So now you teach the child to read these letters. Ta, te, ti, ta, ta, and up the ladder. Ta, ta, ti, ta, ta. And you just practice that until they get good at that and learn to blend. And then from there, you can introduce one consonant at a time. Maybe the next one is your L. The L is always a little tricky because the lowercase L looks like an uppercase I. So that's an important one for the kids to learn. Another good one is S. That's a good one to start with. B. And you just go through and you teach them, you know, la, le, li, la, la, and then up the ladder, sa, se, si, so, sa, ba, be, bi, ba, ba. And it's really boring, but you want to encourage the child, because to them it's really, really hard, and they're going to remember that. Does any one of you remember learning to read? I remember learning to read. Does any one of you remember? It sticks with you, and if it's like horrible and stressful, they're probably not going to enjoy it. Well, it seems really pointless until you realize that by adding another consonant on the end of these words, you can make many other words. You can make tab, tag. You could make tap, tell, ten, tip, Tim, Tom, top, tug, and so on. So once they have this consonant and short vowel sound down, by simply adding another consonant, they can make a lot of words now. And we call those words CVC words. Those are consonant, vowel, consonant words. Now, in a CVC word, there's only one vowel. And that brings up the one vowel rule. When a word only has one vowel in it, that vowel usually says its short sound, which now goes back to the short sounds we talked about: a in apple, a in elephant, I in Indian, in ostrich, in umbrella. So when you look at the English language, most words with one vowel will make the short sound. There's an exception to that I'm going to talk about. So that's the first foundation, is that you teach the child the short vowel sounds. You can introduce all the consonants and their sounds, or you can go through one by one as they learn the blend letters. And then, you know, once they, like, say, have learned the L, they could then make te, tell, because they say the blend and then they add that on the back. Does anybody have any questions so far? If you have any questions, just raise your hand. I forgot to say that. So that's the one vowel rule. We're on the third page there now. That if a word only has one vowel, that vowel usually says its short sound. Now I want to talk at this point about the specific phonics curriculum that I've used with all of our children except Solomon, and that I continue to use, that I really, really like. But I don't want you guys to think that this is the only one you can use. There are many phonetics-based curricula out there. This is just what I really like, and that's really worked well for us. I have some reservations about the rest of that curriculum, so that's why I want to say that I use the Abeka reading program, and it comes with a lot of great supporting materials. That's why I like it. And I'm going to be using those supporting materials to show you. For instance, when you're doing these blends, they have this blend book, the blend and word book. I don't know if this is the current edition. They always change the cover a little. But basically, the blend and word book starts out by having a chart with the short vowel sounds and the consonant sounds. You know, b and belk and cat. And then it introduces these blends. So, you know, there's Lenny Lamb, la, le, la, la, le. You know, the tiger says t, ta, ta. And the child practices to read these. So these are really easy to read. Even before they can read any words, they can practice with this. So I really like the supporting materials. I'm going to be using them throughout. If you get a different curriculum, they will have their own different supporting materials. So you don't have to get this one. This is just what I've really liked teaching the kids. And where am I at in teaching kids? The first 5 know how to read fluently. Anna's about halfway through what I'm showing you right now. And Stephen is just starting. So because it takes 3 years, if you have your kids every 2 years, you'll usually have 2 kids in the program. Like one in the 3rd year, one in the 1st year kind of a thing. Well, this is my only caution I would like to say about the Abeka curriculum. They have too many materials. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of, I need to buy all their supporting materials. They have flashcards. You could wallpaper your entire house in their flashcards. They have flashcards for the short blends. They have flashcards for the long blends. They have flashcards for words. They have flashcards for sight words. They have flashcards for letters. The only ones I use and the only ones I recommend are just their letter flashcards. Just these, the simple ones that have 26 plus 5 for the long vowels. So altogether 31 flashcards. That's the only one I recommend you need. So as far as the readers go, they have a lot of readers that go along with it. And when you look at the readers, on the top of the books, it'll tell you what level they are. And they're intended basically for K4, K5, so that's kindergarten for 4-year-olds, kindergarten for 5-year-olds, and then there's first, second, and third grade. It only takes 3 years to learn to read, but some kids start when they're 4, and some kids don't start till they're in first grade. That's why they have it spread out that widely. Your kid will go through it faster or sooner or later or whatever their pace is. So the only of their materials that I recommend is the flashcards for teaching them their sounds. And you can just go through it and you just play through it and they say z in zebra, k in kite, n in nest, you know. And they learn them that way, qu in queen, wagon, sun. And they go through it and learn it like that. That's one thing. And then I do find the blend and ladder book very helpful because you can practice those blends. But if you don't have this, all it takes is just you writing the blends, just like I wrote them here. This just makes it a little more colorful. And then I will go through the other materials as I move on. But yeah, the big caveat with Rebecca is there's way too much. If you buy all their teacher guides, I don't use any of their teacher guides. I don't use any of their supporting flashcards. There is a way, you could literally spend $1,000 on their reading curriculum alone, and you will feel entirely overwhelmed, and less truly is more. The other book I recommend is a handbook for reading. This is not a standalone book. But what this book does, it goes step by step, 1 page a day, through teaching your child to read. So typically we start by singing the alphabet song. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time won't you sing with me? The kids like singing that, you know. Then it goes into, you know, teaching the short vowel sounds. They got rid of the I for Indian. It's inchworm now because I think it's not politically correct. So mine is an older one. And then, you know, it has some exercises, like I said, to identify, you know, can you hear the e in net, e in fell, and so on. And then it introduces the consonants, and this is where you start with the blend ladders, the same thing as that. And basically, you should just aim for 1 page per day. That will take approximately 20 minutes. See here, the kid starts out just reading a, e, o, a, I, o, e. And just slowly, incrementally, you know, they read the a, la, ta, ba, and just aim for 1 page a day. This is not a standalone. Your child will not learn to read just reading 1 page a day out of this. But it goes through all the steps that I'm going through with you right now. It goes through those in that exact order. This is all the short vowels. This is going to be the long vowels that I will be talking about, and then all the special sounds. So 1 page a day is not enough to teach your child to read, but that's where their other books come in. I'm starting to feel like a Rebecca salesman. I really am not. But that's where these little books come in. So this is like the K4 book, so this one uses all 1 vowel words. Pup, got, dug, is, sat, tag, mop, up. Tip is a pup. So by having these books that go along with the age level of, you know, wherever they're at, because they're all corresponding, that will give your child reading material because they're not going to pick up the Bible and read the Bible when they're first starting to read. They need really simple consonant, vowel, consonant words. Okay? So, but whatever phonics program you choose, if it's a good phonics program, it will have its own materials in this right order to where you can bring it all together. Okay, so we talked about the consonant, vowel, consonant words, and this really, you can see how this, learning the consonants to blend them with a short vowel, and then you add another consonant, opens up a huge big world. Especially when instead of having 1 consonant at the front, like say, let's do this one. Once they're really good at reading just simple CVC words, just 3-letter words, Now you could go like this, okay? So maybe they have learned rap, R-A-P. Well, you can make that into beginning blend by having two consonants at the front and making this a tr-ap, trap. Or you could even make it a three-blend word and call it stir-ap. We still only have one vowel here, and it still makes it short sound. And you can do that with a whole lot of words. So by adding beginning blends and ending blends on 0.5 now, you can turn words into longer words, even though you still only have one vowel in it. So we have task, tent, trip, Todd, trunk, duck has a CK at the end. So now you expanded it beyond just the three-letter words. You could have two consonants in the front, even three consonants in the front, maybe two consonants at the back, or even combining that. You know, straps. He straps his backpack on. Still following the same rule. And it's still following straps. So you see how it is very phonetic. All these words, these letters are saying exactly what they should be saying, but they're just getting more complex. So that, there are so many words you can read that are like that, and again, that's where this book comes in handy, or like the other series. The only thing that I don't think you can buy enough of is readers. A reader is a book that's designed for teaching a child to read. So it starts at a really simple level. Here's some more K4 books that they offer, and then these are what they offer for 5-year-old kindergartners. The I Learn to Read, I Can Read, or I Do Read, and then I Do Read Well, or I Can Read Well. And they gradually build. See, this is the first one in this 12-book series. It just has three-letter words. And it even has a picture with it at first, and then it doesn't. Whereas by the time you get into like the last of these 12 books, you now have entire stories and sentences that have integrated a lot more of the special words and the beginning blends and ending blends and all that jazz. So that's where you do the beginning blends and the ending blends. Still always short vowels. When your child is really, really firm on this, on the short vowel rule, and you've taught them up one way and down the other how to read words with one vowel that says it's short sound, then you pull out the big one. Well, actually, letters have more than one sound. You don't want to tell them that before. Before you tell them, well, A says ah, because A is the letter's name, but it says ah. Just like your name is Isaac, but you don't go around saying Isaac, Isaac, Isaac. You go around saying hi or bye or all sorts of things. So that's what you teach the child. You know, A says ah, but you want to say A says ah. I'm going to have to take an intermission and take care of the baby because she can't get her to sleep. A says ah, but you want to say that because the long sound of the letters conveniently is their name. So the long sound of A is A. The long sound of E is E. The long sound of I is I. The long sound of O is O. And the long sound of U is U. Except, this one has a small exception. It can be U or U. Now, sometimes you say the Y in front of U, and sometimes you just say the U. But we just say U says U is in uniform. So if you've been teaching a child A says as an apple, and you've been teaching them the short vowel words, the one vowel words, it's really easy to then tell them, okay, well, actually A sometimes just says its name. Sometimes A just says A. And that brings in the two vowel rule. And the two vowel rule is that when there are two vowels in a word, the first one makes its long sound and the second one is silent. So, for instance, let's think of, where's my marker? There. Let's look at a word like rip versus ripe. Okay, this one has one vowel. It's short, rip. This one has two vowels. The first one is long, you mark that with a dash, and the second one is silent. You mark that by striking it through. So even though they look very similar, and both of these words only have three sounds. R, I, P, R, I. It has four letters, but it only has three sounds. Does it make sense? This is the silent E, it's a silent second vowel. So the one vowel rule is when a word only has one vowel, it usually says a short sound. The two vowel rule is if a word has two vowels, the first one is long, the second one is silent. I like to teach the kids when two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking, the second one is silent. And they can remember that. So then, once you introduce it, then you can practice that with a child. Like, there are so many words that you can do this with. For instance, maybe they've learned back. Well, now they're going to learn bake. Or, tack, take. Really, an innumerable, I put some examples on here where, the back, bake. So what you practice with a child is now just reading a whole lot of, you basically go through the same process again, where you start back over with all the consonants, except now you're blending them with long vowel sounds. So in this book, to give you an idea, this is how thick the book is. This first red section is all teaching about short one vowel words. The second green section is all teaching about two vowel words or long vowel words. You're still very early on. But it opens up a lot of words. Once your child knows the one and two vowel rule, they can probably read about, I want to say probably like 70% of words will fall into that. So there's just a lot of, Jan, Jane, game. So they just practice. See, it's mixed together, the one vowel words and the two vowel words, and they just go through these. So by the time you've taught your child the sounds of the vowels, the short sounds, and you taught them the consonants, and you taught them the one vowel rule and the two vowel rule, this will probably take a good 1.5 years to get them to this point. And at this point is, and again, you can add to these ones, you can now add, again, beginning blends. Bake could become brake, the brake in your car. Or you could say brakes. And now you have an ending blend, x, because the E is silent. So again, by adding beginning blends and ending blends, there's a huge repertoire of words that would fall under. So you're about, at this point, when your child is done with all this, you're about halfway done teaching them to read. And it will take about 1.5 years to get to this point. Now, while you're doing this, there is such a thing as sight words. A sight word is a word that's the see and say word that you do not teach. It doesn't follow phonetic rules. You just tell them this word just says what it says because that's what it says. I put a list down there of common sight words. The, to, I, you. To occurs a second time. That's a typo. Do, says, said, from, one, are, was, were. Typically, those are the only ones. Maybe, I can't even think. Those will pretty much be all the sight words you need because the phonetics will be so solid that the reason why you teach these words is by knowing these words, even though some of them follow a phonetic exception like the that is actually a special sound that we will cover later. But that's really a word that kids need to know right off the bat so they can say a tub, or a duck fell in the pond, They need an they need a the, and they need an I. So these are really basic words that they need to know just so that they can learn to read and start to read early on. So these sight words you will teach as you go through. And in this particular curriculum and in most curricula, you will find that the sight word will just be listed at the bottom. Like, see here, they're reading really simple sentences. Tab, bit, Bob. Let Bob tell Bill. Here's the first sight word introduced. It's red. And you just teach the child, this is a sight word. It says the. Tib met Tab at the mill. Here's the sight word introduced. A mat, a bat, a bell, a tub. Because A is supposed to either say a or a, and it doesn't say either of those things, so it's a sight word because it says in this case, like a U. So whenever the sight word is introduced, see, it's just the same sight words here. it will mention that in whatever reading book you use, it will have the sight words either in red or in a box sometimes. I've seen them like with a little box around it like that. So those are the sight words. They just come into play as you go along on whatever curriculum you're using, or if you're just totally doing your own from scratch, teaching the kid to read. This is a good list of sight words that you want to introduce pretty much in that order. Okay, so like I said, at this point you're about halfway done teaching your child to read. The second half, which here is just step 9, is just as long as the first 8 steps will take you. And that first line should say as much time as steps 1 through 8 above, not 7. And that's where the rest of this book comes in, but in whatever curriculum you're using, it will be approximately just as long. So what we've covered so far only covers like a quarter of this book, whereas the other 3/4 of the book are all the phonetic exceptions. And this is where all the see and say people come in and say, see, English is not phonetic, therefore you should just learn that this word says this because we told you so. However, even though this is so much longer, once your child can read this, they can already decipher like probably 60, 70, 80% of words. And if they show an interest in reading, they will start reading on their own. And when you start reading on your own, you pick up patterns of these exceptions. And I always start out with these exceptions with my kids, and only with one kid have I ever gotten to the end of the book. And all the other kids, somewhere between this page and this page, their reading takes off to where they can read 90% of words, and the one word that's missing, they can figure out what it says from context, and because some of the letters are saying what they're supposed to say, and they will pick up these exceptions on their own without having to be taught them. So even though volume-wise this is 3/4 of the book, it really doesn't take that long to teach them. So you just start out at the beginning, and whatever phonetics approach you use, there are typically 100 exceptions listed, 100 to 150. So on this one, I think it's 150. So they have k in duck, which really is not a big exception because it's just 2 consonants, like we already learned, you know. They just blend together and say k. Then you learn the rule. This is a rare exception that short words that end in a vowel usually say, short one-vowel words that end in a vowel usually make the long vowel sound. E in me, or we, or be, even though they only have one vowel, because it's a short word, and because a short word ends in the vowel, that vowel makes its long sound. That's an exception. That's not the rule. So this is covered in the exceptions. And this brings up the Y. Now, I told you I was going to get back to the Y. Y in the English language is considered a consonant, but it can also act as a vowel. When it is a consonant, it says y in yarn, y. However, it can also say, so when it's a consonant, it says y in yarn. That's when it's a consonant. When it's a vowel, it can say E, it can say I. Baby. Can you see how the Y is saying the E sound? And in cry, can you see how the Y is making the I sound? So it can act as a vowel, it can act as a consonant, and sometimes it can act as the second silent vowel. If you look at the word pray, A is the long vowel, and Y is the silent second vowel. So it doesn't say anything, but it's acting as a vowel because it's silent. So that's an exception that's taught here. A says pray, because the word like Y and fly and then cry and all those things. And then it just has a lot of blends that it goes through, so those will be easy. Diphthongs. A diphthong is 2 letters that go together, but they're different from a blend, because in a blend you say both sounds. When I say blend, blend has bl, e, nd. And I have a blend here, and I have a blend here, because you can hear both the bl and the nd. Well, that's a blend. A diphthong is when you put 2 letters together and they make one sound, such as ch in church, that's C and H together, sh in ship, th in this or th in thanks. So those are the diphthongs, so it goes through those. It has sh in ship, th in thick, or th in this. There's really no way to tell these apart except you just have to read the word and see which one makes sense. Is it a thud or is it a thud? So the child just has to figure that out. A lot more beginning blends and ending blends. What are some other exceptions it has? So then we have the whole, another common one. This is the R in stars. And that ties in well with, these are called the R control vowels. R. All of these say E-A-R, can also say in verse, in bird, in nurse, in earth. But E-A-R can also say ear in ear. It can also say air in tear. And it can also say in earth. So just this little three-letter constellation here, can say three different sounds. And that's basically all the exceptions that you're going to go through step by step and teach. And whatever curriculum you use, if it's phonetics-based, it will go through all of these exceptions in a logical manner. So here we have R in stars. Let me skip over this real quick. And then we have the, like I said, the in bird words. It will go through the E-A-R, can say ear, air, in tear, or in earth. Oi, there's two ways of saying oi. It could be O-I, it could be O-Y. In the middle of the word, it's usually O-I. At the end of the words, it's O-Y. So this is all the exceptions, and they get just weirder and weirder as you go along. You know, W-O-R says were in worm. A-L-L says all in ball. A-L-K says awk and walk. And that's how you teach it to the child. You spell it out and say A-L-L says all in ball. And then they recognize it as a special sound. And it goes through, there are so many, I'm not going to bore you by going through all of them, but when I point them out, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's true. N in not and n in nat. Either the K is silent or the G is silent. That's an exception. It doesn't say kn and gn, it says just n. But once you know that rule, and you can apply it to all the other words that have that knife, kneel, night, knock, you can then apply that rule, and now it's phonetic again because you learned that exception. And it just goes through all these exceptions one by one. Here we have the that says in wash or adopt, where A actually makes the sound. Y saying the E sound. Ed at the end can make three different sounds. If I asked you what three different sounds can ED at the end make, you would be like, I don't know. But if you think about it, you would know. Oh no, I think I used the wet erase on here. Okay, I guess I'm done using the board for tonight unless somebody wants to wipe it. So ed at the end of a word, ED can say ed as in wanted. It can also say t as in looked. Or it can say d as in played. So just a little ed at the end of a word can say ed or d or t. And if I'd asked you that, you probably wouldn't have thought about that. But now that you think about it, you realize that is what words say. Well, by learning that rule, you can recognize it in words. And you can actually cooked has a t sound on the end. Prayed has a d sound on the end. Painted has the ed sound on the end. So when you see an ed on the end of a word, and you're a child and you're learning to read, you figure out, does it say ed, does it say d, does it say t? And that's just where the practice comes in. And this is basically all these pages. It's just pages and pages with exceptions. You know, we have war and warm, shun. There's two ways of saying shun, either T-I-O-N and nation, or missionary. That's S-I-O-N, but the S-I-O-N can also say jeune, as in television. So when it's at the end of the word, it says jeune, in the middle of the word, it says shun, and shun can also be written that way. Thank you so much. I better get rid of this one. Where was it? This is the wet erase. I don't want to use that again. So the whole rest of teaching the child to read is just going through these exceptions. And as you progress through these exceptions, depending on the child's interest level of how eager of a reader they are, they're going to start reading on their own, and they're not going to need you to sit there and teach them these sounds. They will figure these sounds out on their own as they go. And like I said, I've only ever gone to the end of the book with one child. My other kids all take off and read on their own, typically about 2/3 through this book. And I don't need to teach them that anymore. And that's where the readers come in. I'm just going to talk about the readers a little bit. Well, let me take, well, I don't know, I'm almost done. I probably should just finish up and I'm going to take a break here. So where these readers come in, and Abeka really has some wonderful readers, and that's where all the practice comes in. Because you can go through this book, but you can only read 1 page a day in this book or it's overwhelming, because each book teaches a new rule, a new exception. And you can't just be like, oh, I'll read 10 pages today, I'll learn 10 different exceptions. That's overwhelming. So you want to just read 1 page, but then you want to pick one of the other readers. So for these older kids, you know, like these ones toward the end will cover some of those exceptions. When you're done with these is when you move on to the actual big readers. And these are for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Now if you look in the front of any of their books, it has a list and it breaks it down by grade of the readers. I've only ever used up through 3rd grade. After that, the child knows how to read, and I'm not that keen on their stories, you know. It's like their adaptations of Pilgrim's Progress and stuff like that. Not my thing. So I only use them in the lower grades, the kindergarten up through 3rd grade, to give the child easy reading material that slowly advances and applies more of the exceptions as you go. So when you look on these books, and whatever program you use will have a similar approach, on the spine, like this is called 1-1, 1-2, and they have about 10 per grade. This is 1-5, 1-9, 1-10. I didn't bring all of them. So when you start in 1-1, these are really easy. Even if your child is just learning to read, they can do this one. We have the two, we have a blend ladder, rat, fat, sat, mat. So then we have the sight words the and introduced. They repeat the letters a little bit, the rat, the mat, the fat rat. Now you can read the story, and the child can tell that it's the same story because it has the same symbol until they're done with the story. The fat rat, the rat is fat, the rat sat. The fat rat sat on the mat. And now you know why I said that this can get really tedious and really boring really fast. Sat, bad, ham, sat, bat, had, sad, bad, had. Now this is not how your child will read. Your child will read this as sa, 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 sat. And then they look at you like you have to tell them after every word, yeah, you did it right. Just keep going. I'll tell you if you mess up. So it's really important, even though it's really painfully boring, you want to make it fun for them and you want to encourage them. And that's where this comes in. I typically bribe our kids with candy. These are like organic M&Ms, but you can use chocolate chips, you can use peanut butter chips, you can use gummy bears. And I typically put one at the bottom of a ladder if we're reading down, or at the top of a ladder if we're reading up. Or maybe if we're reading a line, I'll put it at the end of each line. Or here I would put it at the end of the story. And they will get to eat that, and that keeps them encouraged, and it, you know, it makes it fun for them. I also like to have them put little stickers. Like these are the books that Anna's done with, and you can see that she puts a little sticker on the page when she's done with it. You know, they get, it's fun for them to pick a little sticker. And you can pick these up at the Dollar Tree for $1, and they have tons of tiny, tiny stickers in them. And, you know, then they have the excitement of, I get to pick a sticker. These are the big ones. I get to pick a sticker and put it at the bottom of the page. So those are great incentives. The candy. I've also, when they start reading like actual stories, I've paid them $0.05 per page. for reading, and they read 10 pages, you know, they get 50 cents. That's big stuff when you're a child. So whatever it takes to get them, to encourage them to read, because these stories are not exciting to kids either. I mean, they're exciting because they're learning to read, but it's not that exciting, like, especially if you do story time with them, and these stories are kind of bland. So they're really, their main excitement is just that they can read on their own, that there's pictures, and that they can do it on their own. So this book is all just short vowel words. It's very easy. There is not a single long vowel word in this entire book, because this is just 1-1. Then if you look in, say, 1-5, the bridge book, it will now start introducing 2 vowel words. And it has the special sounds, like this one on the side, you can see E-O-Y. That means that this teaches the rule that sometimes one vowel at the end of a short word makes its long sound, E-O and I. This is A and pray, so you're learning all these words. It ties it in with the other exceptions you've already learned, the sh and the th. This is already pretty far in because this is halfway through first grade, so this is a little bit back. This is just 1 and 2 vowel words. Glue, that's an example where U does not say U, it just says U, glue, because you can't say glue. But in other words, like mule, the U does say U. So you have the blends in here, and it kind of teaches like the parent, like, okay, we're going to talk about bl and block. Bless, Blake, black, class, clap, clean, and you know where you're at. So that's the one thing that you can't have enough of, is easy books for them to read on their level so they can progress through and practice all these rules that you're learning. So you should aim at doing 1 page a day with them in whatever curriculum you're using, and then, you know, about 20 minutes of reading in the actual book that they're going to be reading, with lots of rewards and praise, and, you know, keeping it exciting by having a variety of books for them to choose from. And then these books are pretty much the same. It's just for 2nd grade, just more practice. Fun little stories. Some are like adventure stories, adaptations. I know there's like an Aesop's Fable that we have. And really just to where the kids really enjoy reading, and they realize, okay, reading is fun, reading opens up a whole world for me, and they will want to read on their own at that point. So I've never had to go past this, because at that point we just get library books, and they just read tons and tons and tons of library books that we get out. So I'm just going to recap real quick. You teach them the short vowel sounds. You teach them to read simple words that just have 1 short vowel in them. CVC words, sit, sat, hug, pill, all those. When they're good with those, you can add blends at the front and back. When they're really good with that, you bring in this 2 vowel rule with the long vowels. That when there's 2 vowels, the first one is long, the second one is silent. At this point, they're about halfway done learning to read. They can read more than half of words with just those 2 rules alone. And that's when you then gradually start introducing the exceptions. You want to be using some phonics program to walk you through the exceptions. Even I still use this because I can make sure that I'm not forgetting any of the exceptions of the 150 approximately exceptions that there are. And lots of practice and encouragement. And at some point, the child will read so much and so well that they no longer need your help. They can sit on their own and read and have no more questions about it. And then it's time to move on with the next child usually. So are there any questions?
Do you recommend any other books besides just a Bethel?
So the other ones I have used the Landmark Freedom Baptist Curriculum. That's the one I use with Solomon. They're based out of Haines City, Florida. It's a small independent Baptist publisher. I don't know that the church wants me to mention them because they don't really like us. They're like really doctrinally different from us, but their curriculum is good. The LFBC curriculum, that's a good one. I have also used like the Speedy Reader. There's one that's like teach your child to read in 100 lessons. I really don't like that one. It's too much see and say. It's not phonetics enough. I don't like that one. It does not go through the logical progression that I just showed you, short vowels, long vowels, exceptions. It's just all mumbled together, jumbled together. I know some people use like the Dr. Seuss books. The Dr. Seuss books came out because See and Say was becoming so popular in the 50s and 60s that Dr. Seuss kind of wanted to counteract that by bringing in these books that were phonetic. But the books follow no particular pattern. Like in the same book, you'll find one vowel words, like the one short with the CVC words, mixed right in with like an exception like ALL says all and ball. And there's really no rhyme or reason, it just jumps around. So it's more like a remedial phonics system. The Hooked on Phonics is more of a remedial phonics system. I do not recommend that one. I really have not looked beyond just the couple that I mentioned and all the bad ones that I don't like. But I know there's other ones out there that use that same approach, so you don't have to use a Becca.
Do you know anything about the Shirley English program?
I don't.
You
Don't. No, I've heard about it. I've just stuck with this one because it's worked. I have all their readers. I really like it. I'm familiar with it. I can do it absent-mindedly, and it's just really worked well for all our kids, so I haven't really looked anywhere else.
Can you spell the name of it?
A Becca?
Yeah.
I had a really good one, the blue one, I think. It's Becca, all run together like that. I guess the guy and the lady that invented it or that wrote that curriculum, his name starts with A and her name is Becca. So that's where Becca comes from. They're based, they're affiliated with Pensacola Christian College and the Pensacola school system and that whole thing. So of course I'm not recommending that at all. But they have like really good Christian school materials. But because it's intended for a Christian school, that's why there's like way too many supporting materials, because it's intended to teach a classroom of 30 kids with somebody who doesn't also have to cook dinner and, you know, diaper the baby and answer phone calls and live a normal life. So if you're just playing full-time school at home, then their supporting materials are great. But for everything else, they're really overwhelming. In fact, even though I like their curriculum, it's really good, I don't use it for anything else because it's so teacher intensive. Like it'll, in the student book, it'll say, write the answer to the problem your teacher reads you. And then as a teacher, like, okay, what am I supposed to read? 4 plus 7, and they write the answer. Well, I don't have time for that. I just want them to, you know, have 4 plus 7 in their book and write the answer. So that's why the Becca is really overwhelming. And they have on their website, it's really funny, they have on their website a sample schedule for teaching multiple grades. So they have like the K student, and I think it's a 2nd grader and like a 5th grader. And they have it like a little nice little spreadsheet. And it starts at like some ridiculously early hour. I'm still in my nightgown, like 7:30 or something. And it goes to like 1:30, and then it's like, you know, assign homework for the afternoon. And it shows you like, here's the column for the K student, and here's a column for the 2nd grade, and here's a column for the 5th grader. And then it tells you like by time slot, like broken into 15-minute time slots. And whichever one is shaded in, like that's where mom's working. So, you know, the first thing is you do Bible time with all of them. And then you read with your K student, and you do history with this, and you teach English with this. And it basically has the mother full-time busy without a break from 8 or whenever they start until like 1:30. Like she's shaded into one time zone or another this entire time. Well, I don't know about you, but I can't teach school without interruptions from 8:30 till 1:30 every day. That's not even on a perfect day would that work. I mean, that's not compatible with, like to me, homeschooling is something we do in addition to life. It's not just the only thing we do. Like it has to happen while everything else goes on, or it's not going to happen. So even though they have beautiful curriculum and it looks all tempting because it tells you that you can get all the teacher materials and it'll walk you through step by step, and you can literally open the teacher manual and it will say to your student, and then, you know, in italics what you say to them. And it's really cool, but it's overwhelming. And you're nodding your head. Have you tried it?
I don't use my teacher's manual.
And that's with one student. Now imagine that when you have 3 different grades and a toddler who just flooded the toilet. It's just, so their reading program is really good, but I don't recommend it for anything else. Now with that being said, I forgot to mention, their reading program ties in their workbooks. And it's called Letters and Sounds. They have a K4 that I don't use. They have a K5, and they have a 1st and a 2nd grade. That's the only thing of theirs I use. And then at that point in 3rd grade, I turn them over to a different English curriculum. And the reason why, because this again will tie in, it's used, it's Anna's from last year. it will tie in the same order as the book. So like here, you circle the blend that shows that picture. Te for telephone instead of, le for, well, it's not there. Te or le, that's le. So you circle around. So it goes through that. And it starts with just short vowels. About halfway through the book, it introduces the long sounds. And you can see here how Anna marked her long and silent vowels. And so it's a nice book. Don't get the teacher book with it. You don't need it. It's all there. They do approximately 1 page per day, and it'll tell you lesson 123, lesson 124, no, that's still 123, 124, 125. So it tells you at the bottom. A typical school year consists of 170 or 180 lessons. Abeka is all 170 days based. So you just roughly do 5 lessons per week and forget that there's a teacher manual. It tells you everything in the book, except where it's, it says like, say the blend, or point at the blend your teacher says. You don't have the teacher book to tell you, say the sk, not the st blend, but you just pick the one you want to say, and that's the one you say. So you don't need the teacher book for that. So that I recommend also if you're going to go with Abeka, but nothing else of this. Just the readers, the flashcards, the handbook for reading, and this book, like just the supporting books, really, the readers. None of their blend cards or anything like that. It's all overkill. And none of their other curriculum, I'm afraid to say, because it's just intended for a school where you're teaching 30 kids and, that's all you're teaching. That's your full-time job. It's not my full-time job. Are there any other questions? Yep.
Can you just buy what you want?
Yes, you can buy a la carte. You can go to the website and just pick the items you want. It is overwhelming. So when you go to their website, it's not, it can be overwhelming. You can get their hard copy of the catalog, and then it's easy because you can circle it. So, but you can buy each of these items individually. Yes, you don't have to buy a package for first grade or a package for kindergarten. Any other questions? I know somebody online had asked, what do I think about the Finnish approach, where kids start to learn at age 7? This doesn't really tie in with just reading. This just goes for homeschooling in general. I think the biggest mistake that people make is to expect too much too soon of their child. It's really rare that I see homeschoolers that are just too little too late. That's the exception. It's out there, the unschoolers that are really just too lazy to homeschool their kids and they don't want to send them off, so that's just, they're going to learn math by measuring and measuring cups, and that's going to teach them fractions, and that whole thing. That's really rare. That's the exception. Most homeschoolers that I know are way too academic, far too young, and it kind of just kills that learning spirit in the child, and then it becomes like a chore and a drudgery. I do not encourage academic rigor until at least 3rd grade and up. In about 3rd grade is when, even if the child says, I don't feel like reading right now, I don't feel like doing my math right now, I say, well, you need to do it anyway, whether or not you feel like it. There is a time where you have to teach the child that. But it's not when they're 4 years old. When they're 4 years old and they say, I want to go play in the yard, you close the book and you send them in the yard. So the Finnish approach, I guess you don't start learning till 7. I don't think that you can set a firm age on it. I think it just depends on the child. If your 3-year-old is really eager to learn, you should not hold them back. But if your 7-year-old is reluctant to learn, and your 7-year-old would rather play with dolls, send her off to play with dolls, because there's plenty of time to learn. So I think it depends on the child. And that goes not just for reading, but for all else. And as far as the reading, I would say reading is the first thing you should teach your child before you teach them anything else in school. Because once they can read, they can follow the instructions on their own. So start teaching them to read before you do the math and the science and all that, because a child does not need to learn science. I mean, science to them is digging up a worm in the backyard and, seeing what it does when you cut it in half or something, So the reading really is the foundation, because it is the foundation for all other learning that they're going to do. Are there any other questions? Alrighty, well, thank you so much. I hope you learned something. And if you come across a good curriculum that's phonetics-based, let me know, because I'm sure other people, this is not the only one. This is just the one I use, so that's the one I can talk about. But you will recognize other good curriculum that is phonics-based because it will have these same components, basically. So, alrighty, well, thank you so much. I brought some grapes if you guys want some fresh grapes as a refreshment, and you can look at the books. I'm going to have them up on the table. You're welcome to look at them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.